Ha ha ha, kitty. Hi, this is Beth, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the use of myth and fiction and how it can be a way to learn mythology if you want to start reading about it. I just finished reading up a series called The Darkest Rising. It's an older series for, I guess, young adults, children, young adults, and not your young children. It does kind of deal with some darker aspects and has some kind of parts that would be scary in some of the books to younger children, but definitely a very good series. I tried to read it when I was in junior high, but I could never find the first book in this series, and so never ended up reading it when I was younger because the library and the bookstore never had the first book. They had like the second book, the third book, the last book, first book, not so much, never could find it. So I finally tracked it down at Sam Weller's, which was, I'm not sure, I haven't been back in Salt Lake forever, a bookstore, and they sold new books, and they also had a humongous used book section. I was finally able to track down the first book, which is Over Sea Under Stone. In this book, this series draws heavily upon Arthurian myth, Cornish, and Welsh myth, which makes for a really delightful thing because the first book, Over Sandstone, starts its journey in Cornwall and just does a very nice job at portraying a modern use of myth. These children go on this journey to find the Grail, and their great uncle Merry is Merriman, Leon Merlin. It's obvious, but obvious correlation there for him. And they go looking for the Grail. Why he kind of protects them from the dark, because the series is The Darkest Rising. It's about the dark coming out to overwhelm the light. And while it does deal with some duality, it also brings in aspects of what they call high magic and wild magic, and kind of the dichotomy between the two, what different things those two different systems work on. And as a practitioner of magic and of someone who has worked with paganism and different systems, it actually makes a lot of sense. Not everyone's a dualist, I realize that, and not everything dark is bad. And it kind of also portrays, it's like you have these extreme ideals of the light and the dark, and then humans who are good, bad, and everything in between. But you start off looking for the Grail, and you end up backing. Let's see, this is kind of a weird. The second book is The Darkest Rising, and that deals with another. It veers off into a different aspect of it, of the last person born in this circle of light and his journey to find the signs, which he does, and it follows that very kind of hero's journey kind of thing. If you've read any Joseph Campbell, Will goes through this journey to find these signs and deals with, old magic and things like that. And you get Heron the Hunter in there. Just, they're a good read. They're very well written. So if you're an adult reading this, you're not going to be like, oh yes, children's books. And whereas like Harry Potter tends to be a very fantastical magic world that you step into, these are very much rooted in the mundane world. Of course, there is magic and there is fantastical things that do happen, but the basis of the book is in the real world, not, Hogwarts, learning magic. It's taking place in your own neighborhood in many ways. The third book is The Green Witch, which is probably one of my favorites, and it deals with the Green Witch. If you've never heard of her, she's kind of a fertility symbol, and in this book, it's a building of a Green Witch, and they throw her into the sea. and she belongs to the sea, and it's a way to keep the fishermen safe. In this third book, once again, you're back in Cornwall, and this is where the first kids in the first book meet up with Will. And I don't want to reveal too much of the actual storyline because it's a really good story to read, and I highly recommend it to you. So I don't want to reveal too much of the plot line. Fourth book is The Grey King, and that Will once again separates from the first kids that we meet, Jane, Simon, and Barney. And he's in Wales now, recovering from illness. And it deals with him befriending a young man who is the legacy of the Pendragon. And once again, mythic journey to go on a quest to find what they need to find for the new Pendragon to start coming into his power. And the final book is Silver on the Tree, and that's the one I keep flipping around. And that deals with the last rising of the dark and the light, doing their thing to try and defeat them. And just wonderful use of taking modern fiction and old motifs and weaving them together into kind of a new mythic system. And really any mythic system, we kind of tend to think of myth as stagnant, as it's been done, it's been wrote down. And if you're using a system like that, in many ways it's going to keep developing. And you see it in fantasy often, you develop the use of old systems, developing into new systems. And that's really the beauty of mythic systems, is they can keep going on and changing and morphing and creating new meaning within old meaning. And that's the beauty of it for me, is that you can take something old and create and add to it. It's not this set in stone, this is the way it is all the time. There are aspects of it in the past, yes, they're set because they are technically done. And myth, though, is the ability to keep building on it, to create new stories within a mythos, to create new meaning and new nuances with myth. And I think modern fiction is one way to incorporate that, and it also can give you an easy route into going into more academic works of myth, where you're like, oh, this was really interesting. I read this fictional book on Norse mythology or whatever mythos system you're reading about, and it can give you a springboard into an academic work of learning what you're interested in. And a lot of times you find a lot of tidbits of old traditions stuck in there that you might want to utilize. Some of them are kind of cool, and you might not have found that if you had not read that book of fiction. So I highly encourage you, if you're looking for a way to jump into learning mythology, fiction is a great way to start. And